Can you hear me now? Good evening, everyone, and welcome. So glad to see all of you. I don't know if you've noticed, but Nancy is with us. A wave to Nancy. And she can hear us very well, except when I use the microphone. The irony of ironies. So I'm opening, welcoming, and explaining using the microphone. And we did some testing earlier, so she may be able to hear me, but it's not clear. So as soon as I've explained to all of you what's happening and what we're doing tonight, then I'm going to turn this off so that Nancy can hear, because she'll be able to hear whoever speaks close to this owl. So we're going to do our best. So Nancy is just getting over COVID. So she just felt, she's past her 5 days, but just felt it was most prudent to be home tonight. And we thought, we've got this wonderful technology in the owl, and it does work wonders. But what we learned earlier in our technology testing is that it doesn't work well for audio for her. She can't hear us because it's such a big room. So when we use this in a meeting room, it works beautifully, but it doesn't work the same in here. So she can see that you're all in here, but she can't see you clearly. So it really changes what she had planned to do tonight, which was going to be very interactive. So we have talked through the whole plan, which is in your handout, in a variety of ways. We're going to start it. She'll be able to hear questions when I repeat them. I'll listen and repeat them into the owl for her. You'll be able to hear her answers very well. You'll be able to see her slides. We've got a couple points in the schedule that we're just going to see how it's feeling, how you're feeling, and we've got some pivots ready depending on what feels like the best way through. So you will be getting at least some of the content tonight and possibly some time to practice it. We're just got to feel our way through it. And so as you're following along in the handout, when we see we may need to make a change, I will tell you that's what we're doing. And the homework for tonight, for this week that you will take with you, that is also going to change. So it won't be all of it that's on the last page. So please do ask questions. You should be able to hear her very well and see the slides. We'll be able to get your questions to her very well. It's the rest that's a little bit iffy. But the good news is this is a series on transition and not knowing where we're going, and sometimes not knowing what we're doing. So it's actually kind of perfect. It might have been planned. Only God knows. So thank you again for coming. She will be with us next week, and we'll do a full, the interactive with us. And we will see if anyone needs to be with us as a participant on Zoom. We're going to try and make that should be different than this. So I think it will work. Okay. Let us bow together in prayer. Loving God, in all the transitions that we go through every day and all of our lives as people and as a church, we know that your love never changes. Your love for us is always strong and warm and so close to us, as close as our next breath. Thank you for your unchanging love that accompanies us and abides in us and through us, through all of the transitions that come our way. We ask you to bless us tonight, to hear and to see, to interact, and to really listen for your voice. We also ask your blessing on Nancy as she's recovering, on all those who are recovering or walking through a challenging time. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Still testing positive, so it's just best that we do our best this way. And yeah, it's testing our flexibility and our creativity, right? So what we're going to do first, like we've been accustomed to doing, is a little review on last week, and then we're going to talk about the homework. Laura, can you let me know as people raise raise your hand if this is your first time, like you weren't at the other two sessions. Is there anyone brand new?
There's one who's not in this part of the room. He's off to the side. He raised his hand.
Okay. Okay. So maybe someone will need to hold his hand. Buckle up. Yeah. So if there are extra questions, but the videos are out there if you want to get caught up. But we're going to dive in, and then be sure to let Laura know if you have questions, because I won't be able to see your hand. Okay, first of all, let's just recap and get caught up. We are talking about, ironically, listening for God in a murky time, and reflecting on the fact that God is still speaking to us, but it is so hard sometimes to hear that voice, to get that direction, to have the courage to follow. And so in this 4-week series, we are looking at the spiritual discipline of discernment, spiritual discernment specifically, so that we can get better at recognizing God's voice, and particularly in these times. So as you'll remember, we looked at this very busy framework that's a combination of the contemplative practices of ancient faith traditions, as well as more contemporary work of Theory U by Dr. Otto Scharmer. And so I've blended some of the pieces of that lend themselves to spiritual discernment. So let's just walk through this again as kind of a reminder. On the top left there, the downloading, that was the stuck that we get in when we're stuck in the same ways of thinking, in our assumptions, in our biases. It is hard to be creative in that space. It is hard to see new things, and it's definitely hard to hear God when we're kind of in that spiral we talked about in meetings, when we seem to be revisiting the same issues over and over. That's that downloading, and we really get stuck there. So stepping into what God might be doing, listening for God, requires us to kind of put a hold on that, to step away from that spiraling and begin to look and listen with fresh eyes and fresh ears, listening to God and our neighbor and each other to hear God in a new way and with more clarity. But that listening requires a pause. We talked about the importance of pausing and reflecting on what we're learning and listening. And that's where we connect with God, right? We stop and we listen for that still small voice, as scripture often calls it. And out of that reflection is often a nudge, right? We called it intuition, a sense that God is calling us to see something or into something, and always from discernment to action. So it could be an experiment, it could be a conversation. There's a multitude of things that can come out of that pause, but it's some type of action. And we learn from that action. We may repeat the pattern and go back and for a while before we embody a change, but ultimately it's moving us to embody a new way of being. So that's this path of discovery, of discernment. But we talked about how hard it is and the interior conditions that are required to be this open. There's an openness required, open mind to maybe hear things that we might not agree with, or we've never thought about it that way. An open heart to really empathize with another's point of view, or to open our heart to experiencing things differently. And then an open will to step in, even though it feels risky, into something new. So that's as much as we covered through last week. Before we get into homework stories, are there any questions? Did you leave last week going, I don't really get this, or something you want to add? Anything?
Very hard to understand.
A comment that it was very hard to understand altogether. Yeah.
Yeah. It is hard to understand because it's so contrary to our culture and the way we are used to thinking, because we're really up in that left-hand corner, right? With what we already know. What do we say? 90% of our thinking is what we already know. It's all of that above the surface thinking. And discernment calls us to go dig deeper and to listen to what God might be telling us. And the only way to learn how to do it is to practice it. So that we will be doing some of that. And I know Laura will be leading you all in practicing it in different contexts, but it's a lot, right? Yeah. Any other comments or?
There's a question. I'm going to listen and then repeat it.
Okay.
I missed the video. I was unable to get it to come on my laptop.
Oh,
So
from
I
last
was-
week.
I was left with just ask the question, that was when you interview somebody, just ask the question. But so I felt a little just off up in the air and not knowing
What the purpose was and what you might be, how to listen. So the comment was, Nancy, that Jan wasn't here last week and was not able to watch the video for some reason on her laptop. So what she was left with was the handout and the homework.
Yeah,
to
that's
talk to someone without a sense of groundedness in the why of that and
right.
even how of that.
Yeah. Not enough to go on to do that homework, right? Certainly. And you can do it at any time after you get caught up. Hopefully you'll have access to the video. Any other comments or questions?
Okay, no hands are up.
Okay. So let's talk about the homework for a minute and its purpose, and then if anybody gave it a try. This looking and listening on the left side of this discernment practice is really about, we talked about fresh eyes, and it's a deeper listening than we're accustomed to. And it's a listening to God, each other, and our neighbor in deeper ways. So we took the questions, how do you connect with God, or when have you felt close to God? And we were invited to ask someone else those questions. And that could have been a spouse. I shared with you my experience asking my husband, a sibling, a good friend, or someone in church, someone you probably already knew, but hadn't gone that deep with. So I'm interested if someone is willing to share what that was like for the group, and give us all courage to give it a try if we haven't.
Okay, I see a couple of hands up, Nancy, so I'm gonna tell them what our choices are. For Nancy to be able to hear your sharing of your experience, if you would be willing to not only share, but maybe come here so you're close to the owl so she can hear you in your own voice, sharing your experience. Would you both be willing to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, you just got volunteered to go first. So Liz is gonna come up, and Liz, you can either stand here like I am to, you're sharing it with the room, but you know when you stand here, Nancy can hear. And, oh, okay, but here, you wanna face the room, and maybe just say your name and see if Nancy can hear the volume you're using.
Liz Thompson.
Yes, Liz, hi. Thank you so much for being brave, putting yourself out there.
Okay, I used my husband for the person, and we sat at the kitchen table, and I asked him both questions, and he decided to answer the first one, and he was silent for a long time. And then he finally said he feels close to God when he's praying. And it was very hard for me to be quiet and not say anything while he was deciding what to say. So, but he did answer.
So let me make sure I heard the key parts of that. So he took a long time to think about it because these are hard questions, right? These are not questions you get in the jewel line. And so he had to think about it, right? And then you're sitting there biting your tongue because you're wanting to jump in because we were saying your job is to listen, right? Yeah.
It was very hard to be quiet.
Yeah.
I like.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. Was there anything else you said that I missed?
No. Thank you.
Okay. So he finally answered.
Yes.
And well, you don't have to say the content, but what was that conversation like?
He just said he feels close to God when he's praying.
Uh-huh.
We don't talk about this kind of thing at home very often, so this was
Right.
new.
Yes. Yes. How did you feel in that conversation?
I thought it was neat that he opened up.
Yes. How long have you been married, Liz?
38 years tomorrow.
Yeah, see, and this is your first time having a conversation like that. Oh, yeah,
That's it. No, he didn't elaborate, but he just shared that part.
yeah. Do you, are you glad you did it?
Yeah.
I wonder if you'll have more, if that was a jumping off point for you.
We probably won't do it a lot, but.
Pardon me?
Probably will not do this a lot, but yeah, activity.
Come on, you just had a success experience. We're cheering for you.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you for sharing. I hope it is a springboard for more.
Thank you, Liz. Okay, Dawn. Dawn is next. She's coming up.
Okay, great.
So I did, hi.
Hey, Dawn.
So I did 3 people because I wanted to see if there was a difference in how I felt and what the things that they were saying to me. But what I found was a common denominator in all 3 was they all felt closest to God in somewhere outside, somewhere. One likes to run, one likes to be near water, and the other one just likes to be in nature. They answered both questions. So with the second question in reference to being closest to God, the also common denominator was they all feel closest to God when they are alone. And when they're, sometimes when they're praying, but not necessarily all the time when they're praying, but just when they're alone. And they don't want to ultimately always be in a crowd to feel like that they have to pray, or be in a crowd to feel like that they have to be with someone. What I got out of that is all 3 of them have a strong spiritual faith, and they all feel connected mostly at all times. So I felt a little sad about that because I still don't feel like that I have as strong of a spiritual boundary as I want to, and I don't feel as connected. So
Mm.
it was just interesting to see three totally different people and they all share the same, so to speak.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that you both used both the questions. That was impressive. And then the overachiever going for three people.
I needed to see, I felt like if I did just one, I didn't have anything to compare it to. So I wanted something to compare.
Great.
And two, I would have just had to compare with each other. So I wanted to, like a deal breaker. So I needed three. I needed three.
So you learned something there. Yeah. Tell us what that, you said you were sad. Were you surprised at those responses?
From the three people, you
Yeah.
mean? I predicted some of it. Like I knew all three had a spiritual boundary, but I didn't know that all three would be connected the way that they were.
Huh.
So that surprised me. Three
Yeah.
totally different walks of life on purpose, but they all connected the same way.
Yeah.
They all like nature and they all like to be alone. So that was kind of
Mm-hmm.
did it for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think your relationship's any different having had those conversations?
With one of them, it will be different because we are still trying to grow and it's a newer friend. So we're still learning each other. So I felt that we'll be able to kind of become level at some point, even though they're very vastly far out spiritual grounded than me. The other one was my son. And so I just want him to open up. And then
Yeah.
a close friend, and I kind of knew, I thought what I might be getting from her, and I got just what I thought.
Wow.
Yeah,
Dawn, thank you.
you're
Thank
welcome.
you for sharing and for, yeah, taking a step there. Anyone else want to share?
Nancy Jane's coming up to share.
Okay.
Nancy,
Jane, bring it. Hey, Jane.
I talked to two different people. I talked to somebody that is kind of a new acquaintance who is, I kind of knew probably what the response would be. They are involved in music. And so the answer was music, but then they said the sound of children's voices singing sacred songs. And I thought that was so beautiful. I thought it was so beautiful. So I really thank that person for sharing with me.
Yes.
The other person I talked to is a friend who's been a friend for over 40 years, and she now lives in St. Louis. And we talk on the phone a lot. So I asked her, and she said, worship and fellowship.
Mm.
It didn't surprise me, but it surprised me.
Oh,
Yeah, and her answer was very quick. Her response was very quick to me. So
you mean she didn't have to think about it?
you didn't have to think about
Mm.
it at all. No, it
But-
just came right out.
But it
So-
sounds like it kind of surprised you.
Yeah, because she's a deep thinker. And so I thought maybe journaling or
Oh.
studying or something like that. So to have her say those two things were not unexpected, but sort of unexpected.
Yeah.
But it was fun to talk to two people, a new
Yeah.
friend and a former acquaintance, an old friend.
Yeah. I mean, 40 years of friendship and then you learn something new is a gift, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Did it make you want to have more deeper conversations with them, or what did you take away from these?
Kay and I talk a lot, so Kay and I talk a lot, and our phone conversations are usually over an hour, and we cover all sorts of things, but there is quite a bit of church in that. And the other friend that I have now, yeah, it would be fun to have more conversation.
Yeah, good. Oh, great. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else, or we'll move on if not?
No other hands.
Okay. So imagine if you were having these conversations all the time with people, others in church and at coffee hour, deeper, not just these questions, but deeper conversations with neighbors. I mean, this is a whole different level of listening to each other and relating to one another. So this is what we're talking about is just experiencing things below the surface, because you can have a lot of church conversations that never get into what my spiritual experience is with God. So, but it does take courage and practice. So I encourage you, if you didn't do it, to give it a try. And if you did, to keep going and with other questions that come to mind or deeper with the same people and see what happens. All right, let's move into tonight, because now we're going to get into what gets in the way of hearing God's voice. So just when we're listening to one another, like Liz said, it's so hard to wait in the silence. Sometimes we can't hear God at first, and that's a lot of waiting. So that's a great example of something that gets in the way. And so tonight we're going to clear the path, or at least we're going to talk about how that's possible. Not as many concepts this week, so we're going to hit on the concepts. If we're able to practice, we're going to do that. First, I want to start with something Richard Rohr says frequently that gets in the way. He says, most people don't see things as they are, rather they see things as they are. Do you see the distinction there? We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. I heard something. Is there a question or comment?
Yeah, that just don't understand that quite fully.
Okay. So we have filters. We have filters based on past experience, based on our internal biases. So all of us are looking at the world through our personal filters of experience, right? So when I see a puppy, I'm experiencing my experience with puppies when I see it. If you had a puppy and it was a terror in your house when you were growing up and it ate your shoes, you're going to look at a puppy with a completely different lens than I am. But the puppy is still the puppy, right? So we see things as we are, not necessarily as they are. That's what that means. And so let's get into that a little more to describe it a little bit. Really, our brains are filled with these experiences and they form pathways in our minds. So our default is that downloading. We go back to thinking the same thing or thinking things only the way we've experienced them. And Dr. Sharma calls those inner voices of resistance. So we resist the new information, we resist a change of voices because of what's happening in our minds. So let's look at these voices of resistance, and then we'll stop for questions. Okay, the first one's the voice of judgment, and this protects everything I already know. So church is great at this. We do this a lot. Things like every committee meeting needs a pastor present, or church is always on Sunday morning, or this is the way we've always done it. That's probably the most famous or similar. We tried that and it didn't work. So this is blocks an open mind, blocks us from considering new things. And so if we're thinking certain ways, we're not thinking about the new thing that God might be showing us. And often this is a function of our past behavior or our personal preferences too. And yeah, it's not bad. It just is something we have to recognize if we're going to step into the new thing that God's pointing us to. The next voice is the voice of cynicism. And this is kind of an emotional distancing behavior because we don't want to be vulnerable. So I'm not going to participate in that, or this is a waste of time. Maybe you said that before this 4-week series, or the people who aren't here are saying that it's a waste of my time. Before the homework, you might have said, no one wants to have this conversation with me. No stranger wants to talk about God. People often use that kind of cynicism when we talk about evangelism. So it's, yeah, it's cynical about capacity to change, about the world, about God. And it blocks the heart being open to a new way of experiencing things. And then the last voice that keeps us from hearing is a voice of fear. And this is the fear of letting go and stepping into the unknown, right? And boy, all of us experience this. And there's fears like I'll look like I don't know what I'm doing. What if it doesn't work? What if we lose our big donors? That's a common one in the church. A fear of loss is a common voice of fear. All of these serve purposes to a degree. They're all protection at some point. So, for example, if someone's trying to sell you a pill that's going to reverse your aging, sign me up. No. Then you know your judgment kicks in and you know this is a scam, right? So that's the voice of judgment protecting you. It's there for a reason. Or the voice of cynicism there, that will never work. And fear is an important protection. But when these get in the way of seeing things fresh and new, it will block creativity, it'll block imagination and possibilities, all of where God is when God is redeeming and restoring and creating new, right? So the awareness of these voices of resistance are important to be able to say, is that real or is that stuck in my mind from something else? Can I be more open here to consider this new that I'm hearing? Okay, so that's just an introduction. It takes a lot of practice, but I want to stop and see if there are any questions just about those definitions.
Okay, there's a hand up.
Okay, great.
Can you hear me?
Oh, you can come up or I'll just repeat it.
So I just got a comment about these inner voices. So I read every morning, I read like a daily devotional for women. And in that daily devotional today, it was all about how, we gotta go back, how most people don't see things as they are and how they are. And it was telling us to don't be so judgmental about other people and just let them talk and you keep whatever your personal is to yourself so you can hear them better and hear them more clearly so you won't put what you went through on what they're going through. Even if it's,
Did you hear all that, Nancy?
I could hear that. I could hear that. Yes. Wow. What great timing for your devotion. Yeah. So that's exactly why these voices are important. As we listen to God and each other and our neighbor, as our judgments get into play, we really don't hear, right? We're hearing what we already think. We're protecting what we already know, which blocks us off from discovering what they have to say and what God has to say. Yeah. So there's a place for judgment, but not in this initial listening. It will block us off from hearing God. Yeah. Great. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else have a question or a comment?
There's a hand up.
I think the voice of judgment, your comment protects what we already know. I think that's not complete because I think it's protecting what we think we know.
Did you hear that, Nancy?
Yes, excellent. Yes. What we think we know, what we know based on our narrow view, right? Yes, yes. And we might be right, but we have to set it aside for a bit, if we're going to listen with open hearts, open minds, and open wills. Yeah, good. Thank you. Any other comments?
I just have a quick comment because I keep learning this and trying to practice, and I really appreciate what Nancy just said. We might be right. So the voice of judgment doesn't mean that the judgment is wrong necessarily. But this whole exercise is about how we listen and how we may be blocking what someone is sharing with us because of these voices. The voices themselves may be right, but the point right now is how to go into a deeper listening.
Yes.
Do I have that right, Nancy?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And if we remember that God speaks to us through others, often through others, and as Samuel experienced, often it's that still small voice. If we are judging or fearful of how I might have to risk in this scenario, or judging that person before we listen to what they're saying, we may miss what God is speaking to us. So that's what this is about. Yeah. Any other comments?
There are a lot of heads nodding.
Okay.
Not nodding off.
Right. Right. Yeah. This is only day 2 for me without a nap. So I'm feeling good that I'm not nodding off either. Yeah. Okay, Laura, given the time, I'm going to go ahead and go into the block to the shifts. Okay.
That's what I'm feeling too.
Okay, good. So here's what's going to happen, gang. We're going to do the group exercises when I'm physically with you, and then we're really going to play with these. But what I'm going to do next is just teach the last segment, and then we'll pull it all together through the homework and next week. Does that sound good?
Everyone's saying yes.
Everybody's just hanging on. That's great. Okay. So, we can all nod and say, yeah, we got to watch out for these, right? But it is really by God's grace, first of all, that we can quiet those voices to really listen. And to access that grace, we have to practice our connection to God. So that circles us back to where we started on the first session. Our connection to God is the most important practice of discernment. Okay. So there are spiritual practices that help us with these voices. And Susan Beaumont, who's a consultant in church world, she was with the Alban Institute for many years. She does a lot of consulting. She has taken Theory U work, and she's added some spiritual shifts that I want to talk to you about that address these voices. So that's where we're going to go now. Spiritual shifts that help us interrupt. That's a good way to look at it. The voices of resistance, the blockers. So this first spiritual shift is shifting from knowing to unknowing. So this is me thinking I already know to, maybe I don't know. I was telling Laura that I was really working on these for tonight because I had some feelings about how this was going to go, but then I had to say, well, I really don't know how it's going to go. So shift to an unknowing opens us up for possibilities, right? The other next spiritual shift is from advocating for a certain opinion, position, to attending to what's emerging. So rather than advocating it has to be this way, to attending to maybe there's a different way for us to tackle this problem or deal with the situation. And then the last spiritual shift is from striving for a certain result to surrender to what might unfold. And this is, wow, this is really hard. This one in particular, actually, you could argue all three for the church today, because we know, and I mean Big C Church, we know clearly that God is doing something new in the church in North America and around the world. It is changing so rapidly and so exhaustively, right? And we could be striving for a certain picture of the future church that is not at all what God has in mind. So there is a surrender that, yes, this is going to look different. And no, we don't know what it's going to look like. So I think the right side of those spiritual shifts is exactly where the church needs to be today. The acknowledgement that we don't know, the surrender to what God's doing, and the attending to what's emerging. And it's in that attending where our spiritual discernment is taking place. So I'll pause there for a minute and see if there are questions or any ahas or any comments about the spiritual shifts that Susan Beaumont has identified.
Oh, there's a hand up.
Yay.
A request to go over the second point again.
The advocating point?
Yes.
Okay, so that's one side. The blocked side is advocating for a certain position. So I want to go back to an 8 a.m. worship service. Attending is attending to what new thing is emerging based on all the other voices that we're hearing, based on our listening and paying attention to what new thing is trying to be born. So it's advocating for a certain position or attending to what new thing is trying to emerge. So if you're listening to God, it's advocating for what you want or attending to where God might be pointing you. Might be the same direction and might not, right? Is that helpful?
That was helpful. And then there was another question, but how long does that take?
How long does the shift take?
How long does our ability to shift take, or how long does it take us to hear what God is pointing to?
Oh, yes.
She said both. How long does each one of those take?
Yeah. Yeah. So you love the answer. It depends, but that really is it. So in terms of the shifts, it depends on our spiritual maturity, right? How closely connected we are to God, that we're willing to surrender. I mean, that is such a sign of spiritual maturity, that I can quit striving for a certain outcome and surrender. And if you're like me, some days you're better than that at that than others. or some issues, you're better at that than others. The things we're most emotionally invested in, these shifts are harder and take longer and take more attention. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of yes, that makes sense, and there's a hand up.
Okay, can I answer the second part of that question?
Yes.
How long does it take for God to reveal? And that's all on God. We know that sometimes God's timing is not at all ours. And yeah, so patience is required. And then other times you begin discernment and bam, you feel like you get an answer. But as big, if you're thinking about the whole 21st century church question, as big as that is, and as long as it took us to get here, it's going to be, I don't know if it'll be in our lifetimes that we see what God is doing with the church. We might get glimpses. I think, sometimes I think I see glimpses, but it probably won't be in many of our lifetimes. So our call is to attend and nurture what's happening, what God is doing, to pay attention to it, to steward it, but we may not see it. Is that helpful?
She says it sounds kind of spooky.
Ooh, spooky. Well, there's a lot of mystery and faith. Plus, it's Halloween soon, so we might as well get spooky.
Do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, a question.
Question.
So going back to your answer on the second point, you were saying that advocating is us and attending is God. So is that for like all 3 points? Are knowing, advocating, and striving, is that all us? And then unknowing and attending and surrender, is that all on the side of God? You understand what I'm trying to say?
Oh, I could hear that question. Thank you. And thank you for asking, because no, these are spiritual shifts that we are making. So I'm moving from a posture of thinking I know everything to realizing I really don't. And I'm moving from advocating for a certain position or a certain approach or what I believe, to attending to how God might show me something new. And I'm shifting from striving for a particular outcome that I really want to surrendering to what God wants. So the last one is thy will be done. But these spiritual shifts are happening within us if we're open to the grace of the Spirit doing that. Does that help?
Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Did you hear that, Nancy?
No.
She said it makes perfect sense.
Oh, perfect sense. Wow. Great.
I thought I saw some other hands a little earlier. No more hands up.
Okay. Then let's, for the courageous, we're going to do, let's turn to the homework practice on the last page of your handout. If you can just take a stab at this, it's going to jump your understanding of what we're talking about. And then next week, when we're together, we'll really engage in questions and examples and see what it's like. But this is a great way to dip your toes in. So is everyone there on the homework page? Does it look like?
Yes.
I'm leaning forward to the screen like I'm able to see you. I don't know why. I think if I get closer, I'll be able to see you, but it doesn't work. Okay, homework practice. Think of a challenge or a transition that you're facing, okay? And probably it's one, when I say challenge, you're probably in some stuck aspects. You're having a hard time making a decision. You keep thinking about it. So something is kind of gnawing at you. Try to name the ways, this is B, you might be stuck. Okay, so whether it could be in your thinking. Are you doing the same thing, expecting different results, right? This could be a relationship, someone that you continue to argue about the same things, or could be so many situations this could apply to. And really pray and ask for an open mind and heart and will, and really reflect, where might I be stuck? And then go deeper in your reflection and consider those voices of resistance. What is the voice of judgment telling me? How might I be judging? Where's cynicism? And remember, on judgment, I almost don't like that label, because we have a certain preconceived idea of judging. Use the description of where am I, in what ways am I assuming I already know? That might be an easier way to understand that one. And then cynicism, where am I being cynical? And how is fear playing out? And if you want to start with the easiest one, often it's fear. Yeah, what am I afraid of here? So reflect on those. And there's no wrong answers here. You're just practicing, right? How might each of those voices be getting in the way of something God is trying to show you? And then it's nice to thank those voices. Thank you for protecting me. And then letting it go, because they are there for a reason. God gave you those voices for a reason, but they can be working against you in some ways. So you've served me well. I'm going to set you aside for now so that I can see with open, fresh eyes. If you got that far on the homework, that would be wonderful practice. If you want to dive into spiritual shifts with the same scenario, go for it. So you're welcome to do the whole homework practice. Obviously, like, I'm not coming to your house, but you're encouraged to at least try playing with the voices and really reflecting. So pausing in your day. Where are those voices at play that are keeping me stuck, or keeping me maybe not hearing God's voice? And just be free with it and see if you get any insights from some of these practices. Any questions? Or
There are no hands up, but I just want to comment that when you said maybe substituting the word assumption for judgment might be helpful.
yeah.
That was helpful for me. So as I looked at the word cynicism, I wrote above it doubt, just because those words are more accessible for me when I think through challenges. Is that on track?
Yes. Doubt, skepticism can go there too. Yeah. Good. And it's assumptions, biases, or just what I think I know. And since we're diving a little deeper in each of these, also remember, most of you probably know this, but lots of feelings mask fear. So you may not think you're afraid, but you feel anger. Well, is there a fear underneath that anger? It's always worth digging. So fear can show up in a lot of different ways. Any other comments? Pardon me?
I said that was helpful.
Oh, okay, good. Any other questions or?
No hands up.
Okay. You all, parting prizes for everyone again tonight, Laura. I hope you brought your bag of gifts
but I'll bring it next week.
For getting through tonight like this. I'm so sorry. I hope that I trust that God will speak to you somehow through this tonight. And so I encourage you to be open mind, heart, will, for what what is it that God was showing you tonight as you think about these voices that block our openness and the spiritual shifts that help us be open. So there's a closing prayer at the bottom of your last page there. Wonder if we could read that together as a way of closing. Shall we?
We're ready.
Okay, I'll start. You all jump in. Lord, I believe my life is touched by you, that you want something for me and of me. Give me ears to hear you, eyes to see the tracing of your finger, and a heart quickened by the motions of your spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Nancy.
Okay, I'll see you all next week. I'm going to have bells on.
Oh, boy. And I will have the bag of gifts and fabulous prizes. I wrote it down. Yeah,
There's
oh,
gonna
the
be a blue sedan.
This is a comment. I
Comment.
generally find fault with technologies
Yeah.
because they often don't work,
Yeah.
but this was amazing. Kudos to,
Yeah, kudos to Jonah and all our technology.
Yay, Jonah.
thank you.
Thank you for saying that, Jan. Yeah.
Yeah, I was a skeptic.
Yeah. Thank you for being with us this way, Nancy.
Yeah.
Feel better.
And feel better.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Bye.